Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Setagaya family murders. This case has been unsolved for over 2 decades, and it's one that really haunts people in Japan and around the world. The murders themselves happened back in 2000 on December 30th, and it was the entire Miyazawa family that was murdered brutally in their home. And one of the things that makes this case so chilling is that the killer didn't just run away after the murders, he actually hung around the house for hours.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that you just scratch your head at. I mean, you have so much evidence. You have fingerprints, DNA. The killer even left behind some of his personal belongings. You'd think it'd be easy to find the guy. But 24 years later, still nothing. And what he did in the house after the murders, well, that just adds another layer of mystery. Makes it even creepier.
Right. So, okay, let's start from the beginning. Can you tell us about the Miyazawa family? What was their life like before all this happened?
So the Miyazawa family lived in Setagaya, which is a ward in Tokyo. It was a pretty quiet residential neighborhood. The father, Mikio Miyazawa, he was 44 years old, and he was a businessman doing quite well for himself. And his wife, Yasuko, she was 41. She was a homemaker. They had 2 young children, a daughter, Niina, who was 8, and a son, Ray, who was 6. One thing that's kind of interesting is that their house was actually one of the few left in the area because it was slated to be redeveloped, torn down and new buildings put up. I don't know if that plays into the case, but it's definitely something to keep in mind.
So, a pretty normal family living in a neighborhood that was about to change. Can you walk us through what happened on December 30th, 2000? Like, what was the family doing in the hours leading up to the murders?
Well, it seemed like a pretty ordinary day. Yeah, they did some shopping for groceries and presents, getting ready for the New Year's holiday. It was a Saturday. They spent the evening at home, like any other family. Just a normal day, really. They had no idea what was coming.
And what do we know about how the killer got into the house? And, when did the murders actually take place?
So it looks like the killer probably got into the house around 11:30 p.m. that night. Investigators have gone back and forth about how he got in, but the most likely spot is a bathroom window on the 2nd floor. They found it unlocked. And here's the thing, there weren't any signs of forced entry. So that makes you wonder, right? Was it someone the family knew? Someone they felt comfortable enough with to let into their home?
Yeah, that's a creepy thought. So what happened next? Can you kind of break down how the murders happened?
Well, it seems like the killer's first victim was little Ray. They found him strangled in his bed, which was up on like a little mezzanine floor. It's thought that Mikio, the father, might have heard something and went to see what was going on. And it seems like he confronted the killer downstairs on the 1st floor. There was a struggle. The killer had a sashimi knife with him. You know those long, thin blades they use to prepare sashimi? And he stabbed Mikio multiple times. In fact, the knife actually broke during the attack, and a piece of it was stuck in Mikio's skull. They found his body at the bottom of the stairs, so maybe he was trying to get away, maybe trying to get to his family when he was attacked. It's like the killer was really enraged, especially towards the women. He first attacked them in the attic. And remember how I said his sashimi knife broke? Well, he grabbed a knife from the family kitchen, a Western-style knife, and continued the attack. Yasuko and Niina, they fought back. They tried to get away using the folding ladder that went from the attic down to the 2nd floor. But he caught them. He found their bodies on the 2nd floor, huddled together at the bottom of the attic stairs.
Oh, that's just awful. So the killer murders this entire family, and then what? He just leaves.
Well, no, that's where this case gets really strange. Instead of just taking off, he stayed in the house for hours.
What? Seriously, what was he doing all that time?
That's what's so weird about this case. It's not just that he killed his family, but what he did afterward. Like, he was totally nonchalant about it. And there's all these little things that he did, these really mundane things, that have been puzzling investigators for years.
Okay, let's hear about these things he did. What did he do first?
So remember I said he struggled with Mikio? Well, he must have cut his hand during the fight. And he actually used the family's first aid kit to bandage it up.
Wait a minute. He just murdered 4 people and he's worried about a cut on his hand.
I know, right? It's bizarre. Like, you'd think he'd be worried about getting out of there. It just doesn't make sense. Unless maybe he just didn't care about getting caught.
So he patches himself up, and then what?
Well, then he goes to the refrigerator and helps himself. And I'm not talking about just a quick snack. He actually ate several tubs of ice cream. Like, he squeezed the tubs to push the ice cream up and ate it right from the container, leaving fingerprints and saliva everywhere.
It's like he was having a midnight snack. A really creepy, disturbing midnight snack.
And he didn't stop there. He also ate some melon. using his bare hands. Again, more fingerprints. And then he made himself a cup of barley tea.
So he's just chilling in the house, eating, drinking, and it's almost like he was trying to be a part of the family, even though he just.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most disturbing aspects of this case. It's not just the brutality of the murders, but the way the killer seemed so comfortable in the house after it happened, almost like it was his own home.
It's just so strange, like he wanted to be a part of the family or something.
Right. Like he was trying to replace them or
But
something?
he wasn't done yet, right? He did some other weird things before he left the house.
Yeah, he spent some time on the family computer. Like, browsing the internet. And he even made a new folder on the desktop.
Did they ever figure out what he was looking at online?
Unfortunately not. I mean, it would be really helpful to know, right? What was going through his mind? Was he looking up news about the murders? Was he trying to taunt the police? Or maybe he was just trying to act like everything was normal.
It's just creepy. So what else did he do before he finally left?
Well, he used the toilet, but didn't flush it. Which, I mean, I guess that's kind of gross, but, to investigators, that's another clue about the killer's state of mind. He also went through some documents, like family papers and stuff, and threw some of them in the bathtub. Again, like, he wasn't even trying to hide what he did. There's even been some speculation that he might have taken a nap on the sofa.
A nap. Seriously. After all that.
I know it's hard to believe, but that's what some people think. I mean, if it's true, it kind of points to the idea that this wasn't just a crime of passion. Like he just snapped. It seems more planned out and just, well, disturbing.
Okay, so after hours in the house, he finally leaves. But he didn't leave empty-handed, did he? He took some things with him. And he left a ton of evidence behind. It's like he almost wanted to be caught.
Yeah, you could definitely see it that way. I mean, the amount of evidence is one of the things that makes this case so strange. You've got clothing, the murder weapons, fingerprints, DNA. I mean, it's all there, pointing right at him. And still, they don't know who he is.
So let's talk about that evidence. What exactly did he leave behind?
Okay, so clothing-wise, he left a hat, a jacket, a scarf, a sweatshirt, gloves, his hip bag, and 2 handkerchiefs. Practically a whole outfit.
It's almost like he was being deliberate about it, leaving behind so much personal stuff.
It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? Maybe he thought he was too smart to get caught. Or maybe he wanted to throw the police off his trail.
So let's go through some of the specific items. I know there was something about the sweatshirt that was important.
Ah, yes, the sweatshirt. That was a really rare find. Like, they only sold a very small number of them in Japan.
Did that help the investigation at all?
Well, it did help them to narrow things down a little bit. They were able to figure out which stores had sold that sweatshirt and even track down some of the people who bought it. But unfortunately, it didn't lead them directly to the killer. But it did suggest that maybe he wasn't from the area, so that expanded the search.
And what about the shoes? I remember reading that they were unusual too.
Right, the shoes. They were Slazenger sneakers, which was a brand that wasn't that common in Japan at the time. And the thing is, the size the killer wore, they didn't even sell that size in Japan.
So that means he might have been from somewhere else?
It's definitely a possibility. The closest place they could find that sold those shoes was South Korea. And that led to a lot of speculation that the killer could have been a foreigner, maybe a soldier stationed in Japan.
And then there was the hip bag. That had some really interesting evidence in it, didn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. The hip bag was like a gold mine for the investigators.
Yeah.
They found some of his hair in it, which gave them a DNA sample. But here's the really crazy part. They also found sand. And not just any sand. They analyzed it, and it turned out to be from 2 different places. A skate park in Japan, and get this, the Nevada desert, near Edwards Air Force Base in California.
Wait, how is that even possible? A skate park in Japan and a military base in the U.S.?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a detail that's been bugging investigators for years. The sand from Nevada sort of supports the idea that the killer could have been a U.S. serviceman, maybe someone who had recently been to that specific area in Nevada. But then, how did he also get sand from a skate park in Japan? It could be just a coincidence. Maybe he was a civilian who'd visited both places. Who knows? But it's definitely a weird detail.
You mentioned DNA evidence. You'd think with all this evidence, including DNA, they'd have solved this by now.
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? But it's not that simple. For one thing, back in 2000, DNA technology in Japan wasn't as advanced as it is today. And then you've got the legal restrictions on how they can use DNA evidence and who they can share it with. They ran the killer's DNA through the Japanese database and didn't get any hits. And they couldn't share it internationally.
So they had his DNA but couldn't do much with it.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, it's got to be frustrating for them. They had this potentially huge piece of evidence, but couldn't really use it to its full potential.
Mm.
But there's still hope, right? DNA technology is always improving. And maybe those legal restrictions will loosen up a bit. Maybe someday that DNA will finally lead them to the killer.
So besides the clothing, the hip bag, and the DNA, what other evidence was there?
Well, he also left behind the murder weapons, both the sashimi knife he brought with him and the kitchen knife he took from the Miyazawa's house. And he left fingerprints all over the place, like on the doorknobs, the refrigerator, even the ice cream containers. It's like he wanted to leave a trail, but a trail that led nowhere.
So what about the investigation? What were some of the first things the police looked into?
Well, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police, they really went all out on this case. It was one of the biggest investigations they ever did. Over 280,000 investigators working on it. They followed up on thousands of leads, looked at millions of fingerprints. They really did try everything, but nothing seemed to pan out.
I read that they looked into Mikio's business dealings, like trying to figure out if he had any enemies.
Yeah, they definitely did. They looked into his business partners, his clients, anyone he might have had a problem with. But they couldn't find anything substantial. Mikio was a respected businessman. There was no indication that anyone had a grudge against him or wanted to hurt him.
And Yasuko, did they look into her life too?
Of course. They talked to her friends, family, neighbors, anyone who might have known something, looking for any signs of trouble. But again, nothing. The Miyazawas, they seemed like a happy family. No one had a bad word to say about them. They were well-liked. No enemies, no history of trouble, no reason anyone would want to hurt them.
So no clear motive, no personal grudges. What about robbery? Could it have been a robbery gone wrong?
But they considered that, of course. But remember, they left a lot of valuables behind. And the way the killer acted, the eating, the drinking, the computer, it just doesn't fit with a typical robbery. It felt more personal, more like it was planned out and fueled by anger.
So if it wasn't robbery and it wasn't personal, what was it?
That's the big question, isn't it? And over the years, people have come up with all sorts of theories trying to make sense of it all.
So we've talked about the evidence, the investigation, and we still don't have a clear motive. What about those theories you mentioned? I know people have come up with all sorts of ideas over the years trying to explain what happened.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This case has really captured people's imaginations. I mean, it's a mystery, right? So, of course, everyone wants to try to figure it out. And there's no shortage of theories out there. Some of them are more believable than others.
So let's start with one of the big ones, the military connection theory. What's that all about?
Okay, so this theory kind of came about because of a couple of things. Remember the sand they found in the killer's hip bag? Well, some of it was linked to a spot near Edwards Air Force Base in Nevada. And then you've got the Slazenger shoes. The killer wore, that wasn't even sold in Japan. So some people started thinking maybe the killer was a U.S. serviceman stationed in Japan, maybe someone who had been to that area in Nevada.
That makes sense, especially with how violent the murders were. It makes you wonder if he had some kind of combat training. But were there any problems with that theory?
Yeah, there were a few things that didn't quite add up. The DNA suggested that the killer was mixed race, which isn't impossible for a U.S. serviceman, but is less likely back then. And the police thought the killer was pretty young, like late teens or early 20s, which would be kind of unusual for someone stationed overseas.
So maybe the military connection isn't the answer. What are some of the other theories?
Well, another theory that got some attention was the hit gone wrong theory. And this one focuses on Mikio and his work. He was involved in international business, right? So the idea is that maybe he made some enemies, someone who wanted him dead. And the murders were a hit that went bad.
So Mikio was the target and his family was just caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, that's the idea. But the police, they looked really closely at Mikio's business dealings, and they couldn't find any evidence to support that theory.
We keep coming back to the motive, or the lack of one. It's so frustrating. What about the skate park? That sand they found in the hip bag, wasn't that linked to a skate park in Japan?
Yeah, and that's where the skater theory comes in. The skate park wasn't that far from the Miyazawa's house, and there were some little clues that suggested maybe the killer was into skateboarding. So people started thinking maybe it was some young skater who, I don't know, lost it and attacked the family.
That's an interesting theory, but was there any evidence to back it up?
Not really, no. The police talked to a lot of skaters, looked into the skate park, but they couldn't find any real connection between the skate park and the Miyazawas.
It seems like every lead just hit a dead end.
It's true.
Mm.
And that's what makes this case so hard to solve. There are all these pieces, but they don't seem to fit together.
There's one more theory I wanted to ask about, and it's kind of a scary one, the 2chan theory, right? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this one's a little unsettling. So 2chan is this online forum in Japan. It's known for being pretty anonymous and, well, people could post some pretty wild stuff there. Anyway, a few days before the murders, someone posted on 2chan saying they were going to kill a family before the end of the year.
That's terrifying. And the person who posted that was just a kid.
Yeah, they claimed to be 13 years old. Of course, you never know online, right? It could have been anyone.
Did the police ever find out who posted those messages?
They tried, but it's really hard to track people down on 2chan because it's so anonymous. It's a real challenge for law enforcement. So we still don't know who posted those messages, or if it was just some sick joke, or if it was actually connected to the murders.
That's a really creepy thought, that maybe the killer actually announced his plans online before doing it. But again, no real answers, just more questions.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes this case so haunting. There's so much evidence, but no clear explanation. It's a crime that shocked Japan and really left its mark on people.
It's been 24 years and they still haven't caught the guy. It makes you think about like how vulnerable we all are. You think you're safe in your own home, but then something like this happens.
It's a tragedy for sure. And it really changed how people in Japan thought about safety and security, and the justice system too.
Mm.
People started asking if the laws about DNA evidence were strong enough, and if there was enough being done to keep people safe.
It's a case that really sticks with you. You can't help but wonder what really happened that night. And will we ever know the truth?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? It's definitely a case that's hard to forget. But you know what? Even though it's been so long, there's still hope. Maybe someday they'll find something, some new piece of evidence that finally breaks the case wide open.
It's a case that reminds us that even in a place like Japan, where things seem so orderly, there are still mysteries that might never be solved. But maybe, just maybe, someday we'll finally get those answers for the Miyazawa family.